I never imagined that the complications I faced during pregnancy could come back to haunt me decades later. These haunting words could come from any woman who has unexpectedly discovered that her risk of a future stroke might have been determined long before her child took his or her first breath. Today's discussion dives deep into one of the most startling revelations about a woman's long-term health, that certain pregnancy complications might be a powerful predictor of elevated stroke risk many years down the line. Are we talking about a subtle warning that could help women stay healthier for longer, or a grim reality that no one wants to face? In this comprehensive exploration, we will uncover the critical discoveries made by researchers studying millions of women, examine how these findings reshape our understanding of stroke risk, and shine a spotlight on what can be done to ensure a brighter, healthier future for mothers everywhere. In this episode, we are focusing on what happens when something goes wrong during pregnancy, something as commonplace as high blood pressure or high blood sugar, and how that single event could influence a woman's cardiovascular status long after her baby has grown. We will ask the most urgent questions. Why does preeclampsia appear to cast a long shadow on future well-being? Which specific pregnancy complications are most likely to hint at dangerous changes in the small blood vessels? And perhaps most important of all, how can doctors, friends, and families come together to give women the best possible chance of avoiding a health crisis decades later? In the next few segments, we will trace the cutting-edge science behind these concerns, weaving in heartfelt human stories that drive home the gravity behind every statistic. We are about to explore a study that spanned many decades and involved over 2 million women. If you are someone who believes in the power of early warnings to prevent catastrophic health problems, get ready, because we are going to lay bare the hidden signals that your body may be sending. We will look at how carrying a baby who is smaller than expected can hint at underlying inflammation or blood vessel dysfunction, and how that might translate to a much bigger problem in the future. We will also dig into why preterm delivery, pregnancy high blood pressure, and gestational diabetes are not merely fleeting issues to be dealt with for 9 months and forgotten thereafter. To keep you on the edge of your seat, here is a quick preview of what lies ahead. You will hear how a team of scientists led by a pioneering researcher decided to see if a seemingly short-lived complication, such as high blood pressure, could translate into lifelong cardiovascular trouble. We will also uncover the role of shared genetic and environmental factors, both of which researchers investigated by comparing sisters who had delivered babies under different circumstances. Does having a particular family background predispose some women more than others? Or was the actual pregnancy complication itself the real culprit? Now, let us begin with the big question. Why would a complication of pregnancy, often resolved shortly after birth, predict a stroke 1, 2, or even 3 decades later? The best place to start is with our tiny but immensely vital blood vessels. Scientists have pointed to placental abnormalities and systemic inflammation as 2 possible culprits that, when triggered early in life, could set off changes in the blood vessels that continue to progress, ultimately leading to a major cardiovascular event. With stroke being such a prominent cause of disability and death worldwide, researchers are committing extensive time to uncover the root causes that might lurk in the distant past. Imagine a future scenario. A mother who had preeclampsia in her 20s is sitting in a doctor's office in her 50s, complaining of transient vision problems or numbness in her arm. The doctor, recalling the mother's complicated pregnancy from so many years ago, might say, "Let us run an extra check on your cholesterol and blood pressure. We have known for a while that events in pregnancy can show us who might be more prone to stroke." The scenario may sound extreme, but experts argue that it should be commonplace for physicians to use the lens of pregnancy history to predict and prevent life-altering events. After all, alleviating even one woman's chance of suffering from stroke can mean far-reaching benefits, not just for her, but for her entire family and community. When we talk about stroke, we typically think about experiences that might cause immediate, dramatic symptoms, a face droop, an inability to raise an arm, or sudden speech difficulties. It is a terrifying moment that can change a life in less time than it takes to blink. Yet, as the new research emphasizes, in some cases the foundation for that emergency might have been laid decades earlier. The study at the heart of this revelation followed women for many years, well beyond the completion of the childbearing period. By doing so, researchers could meticulously record how many ended up experiencing a stroke, and whether the pregnancy red flags made that more likely. It turns out that close to one-third of all pregnant women in that large-scale study face some kind of complication. By complication, we mean conditions such as preterm birth, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, or delivering a baby who is smaller than typical for the gestational age. On the surface, having any of these issues can be tremendously stressful, but they often get resolved by the time the newborn and mother leave the hospital. So, it is easy to imagine that, over the subsequent years, many people simply forget what happened. They move on, celebrating milestones like first birthdays, kindergarten graduations, and eventually the child's own college acceptance letter. Yet, if you were able to look inside these mothers' bodies as they go about their lives, you might see subtle changes unfolding. One of the major revelations was that women with pregnancy high blood sugar or high blood pressure had nearly double the risk of stroke compared to their peers who did not have these complications. For reasons related to abnormal placental function, endocrine disruptions, or vascular stress, these two issues in particular emerged as potent indicators of future trouble. Meanwhile, preeclampsia was linked to an elevated stroke risk of more than one-third, a number that highlights the seriousness of that condition even after it seemingly resolves post-birth. Here is where it gets even more intriguing. The study also looked at women who had more than one complication. Perhaps a mother delivered her baby early and also had high blood pressure, or maybe the baby's birth weight was very low and there were concerns about the mother's blood sugar. Try to imagine how these combined factors might compound over time. Scientists saw that multiple complications stacked up the risk even further, and the consequences did not fade away a few years after delivery. In fact, the higher relative risk could persist for 30-plus years, well past the phase of busy school runs and teenage drama, finding women at a point in life when they might have hoped to be less concerned about medical troubles. Now, before we go any further, let us take a pause. Did you find any of this eye-opening so far? If yes, feel free to show a moment of support. Sometimes a simple gesture, like tapping the like button, is enough to let us know that you value this kind of deep dive content. It also helps guide future discussions on similarly pressing health topics that matter to real women worldwide. Readers may wonder, what if stroke risk simply runs in families? Maybe these women share genetics that predispose them both to pregnancy complications and stroke. The researchers accounted for that possibility by looking at sisters within the study group, since sisters share similar backgrounds. By comparing siblings, they aimed to strip away confounding influences such as shared environment or inherited tendencies. The surprising result was that even within families, the link held firm, meaning that the pregnancy complication itself could not be brushed aside as a small artifact of family history. This pointed to the need for serious clinical vigilance anytime a mother experiences a high-risk condition around the time of delivery. We must not forget the role that mental and emotional stress might play in all this. Combining the physical demands of high blood pressure or diabetes with the psychological toll of having a baby in the neonatal intensive care unit can create a hefty burden. Pressure to care for a vulnerable newborn could trigger patterns of poor sleep, anxiety, changes in eating habits, and possibly an onslaught of stress hormones that can wreak havoc on the cardiovascular system over time. And once the initial postpartum period is over, mothers face ongoing responsibilities that can keep them from focusing on their own health. It is reminiscent of the classic scenario. A new mother is so overwhelmed with the demands of mothering that she postpones her own checkups, neglects minor symptoms, and misses out on chances to control high blood pressure or diabetes in its early stages. By the time the mother hits her 40s or 50s, the underlying problem might be more severe. When it comes to stroke, we all know that by the time symptoms appear, the window for prevention may have already closed. That is what makes this new line of research so essential. It forces us to talk about pregnancy as a powerful stress test, something that can reveal red flags well before they become unstoppable. On the bright side, the study also opens doors for more targeted interventions. If you or someone close to you experienced a complex pregnancy, it might be advisable to talk openly with healthcare providers about more frequent blood pressure monitoring, earlier checks for high cholesterol, and personalized plans to increase exercise or modify diets. The difference between having a mild case of preeclampsia, dismissed as just one of those things, and having it recognized as a future risk factor for stroke could be monumental in shaping a woman's health trajectory. At this point, you might be wondering, is there any good news in all this? Are these stroke cases inevitable, or can we change our fate? Indeed, there is positive news. The study does not suggest that having pregnancy complications guarantees a stroke later. It only increases the overall likelihood. Many women who have had tricky pregnancies live full, vibrant lives, never encountering that dreaded moment of a cerebrovascular event. Nevertheless, awareness is key. Doctors stress that understanding your past pregnancy experiences is not an exercise in dwelling on the negative. It is a strategic move aimed at prevention. If you know that you are at higher risk, you can watch for early warning signs, maintain healthy blood pressure levels, keep an eye on blood sugar, and adopt lifestyle changes that can drastically reduce future risk. Another angle to consider is the growing push for more robust postpartum care. In many places, once a mother is cleared after the 6-week checkup, there is less structured medical follow-up, leaving any ongoing or future complications up to chance. However, with data suggesting that the first decade after delivery is often the riskiest period for stroke among these mothers, it would be prudent for healthcare systems to adjust postpartum guidelines. Imagine if every mother diagnosed with preeclampsia or gestational diabetes received scheduled checkups at least a couple of times a year for the first 5 years after birth. This structured approach could catch creeping signs of vascular trouble much sooner. One might parallel the process to that of a building inspector checking a house. If cracks appear in the foundation after an earthquake, the earthquake here being a challenging pregnancy, no one would simply allow them to remain uninspected, hoping the structure never collapses. You would bring in professionals to do a detailed evaluation and figure out the best repair strategy. In the same way, a complicated pregnancy is a sign that your body's foundation may have been tested vigorously under stress. That is not necessarily a reason for alarm, but it is a call to pay closer attention. Perhaps a thorough check every few years is the difference between living stroke-free and facing a devastating outcome at a later date. Let us look even deeper at some of the more likely culprits. High blood pressures, including preeclampsia, can damage the delicate inner lining of blood vessels, setting off a chain reaction. Over time, the blood vessels can become less flexible, encouraging plaque buildup and making blockages or ruptures more likely. Similarly, elevated blood sugar during pregnancy could signal underlying metabolic issues that only escalate with age, leading to diabetes, an even bigger risk factor for stroke and cardiovascular disease. Each risk factor packs a punch, but combine them, like in the case of a woman who not only dealt with gestational diabetes but also delivered a baby prematurely, and you have a circumstance ripe for long-term cardiovascular repercussions. What about the baby's own status? Delivering a baby who is especially small for the gestational age may result from placental insufficiency or other systemic problems that hinder normal nutrient delivery. This condition can point to potential vascular dysfunction in the mother's body. The same processes that restrict blood flow to the fetus might also heighten stroke risk for the mother in later life. The good news is that pinpointing these issues can nudge us toward earlier interventions, such as advising the mother to watch out for subtle signs of vascular disease or to adopt measures that bolster cardiovascular resilience. Now, if you are intrigued by all these revelations and you do not want to miss out on equally fascinating insights in the future, consider subscribing or following this channel. That way, you will stay up to date on emerging research, practical tips, and stories of individuals who are turning these findings into proactive health measures for themselves and their loved ones. We want you to be part of a well-informed community that places safety, longevity, and empowerment front and center. That said, no discussion about stroke risk would be complete without addressing lifestyle factors: obesity, smoking, an unhealthy diet, a sedentary routine. These are all well-known contributors. Women who have already experienced a signal of increased risk might benefit tremendously from even moderate changes in these domains. Walking regularly, stopping smoking, or seeking better stress management can shift the scales over the long run. Some might even liken these modifications to planting seeds in the garden of personal health. Small steps now can grow into a protective canopy that shelters you from storms later. Lest we forget, the mental and emotional side of motherhood is equally important. Studies have shown that prolonged psychological stress can lead to heightened cortisol levels in the body, which, over time, can reshape metabolic patterns and cause blood vessels to lose their elasticity more rapidly. Thus, women who have particularly stressful postpartum experiences, especially if complicated by a child's extended stay in the hospital, may need even more targeted emotional and social support. From postpartum counseling to community-based programs that provide balancing strategies, there is a lot that can be done to maintain emotional equilibrium and lessen the impact of chronic stress. It is also worth pointing out that the scientific community's perspective on stroke risk is evolving, and stories like these exemplify how research can be a catalyst for major policy changes. One day it might be standard protocol for every woman who had gestational diabetes to receive robust, continuous follow-up for decades. Insurance providers might be encouraged to cover specialized screenings precisely because these measures can reduce the massive expense of stroke care later. The question is, how quickly can these changes be implemented, and how well can they be tailored to different populations around the world? Think about the potential ripple effects on future generations. If a woman knows she is at higher risk, she can share that knowledge with her daughter, encouraging the daughter to pay extra attention to her own pregnancy health and risk factors. This fosters a culture of awareness and early intervention. That daughter, in turn, might gather support from her own community, generating a broader wave of prevention strategies that could significantly reduce the prevalence of stroke across multiple populations. And in parts of the world where maternal health resources are scarce, targeted programs could help identify at-risk individuals and offer crucial medical guidance. At this point in our story, we step back and marvel at how a single, finite event, pregnancy, can carry such long-term significance. Researchers and clinicians now hope their findings will spark better integration between obstetric care and stroke prevention. Imagine if, at the time of birth, mothers received a short briefing. You face some risks with blood pressure. That means you will need to follow up with a cardiologist after 6 months, then again in 2 years, just to be safe. Simple steps like these can transform the postpartum experience from a short window of intense monitoring to an ongoing partnership in health management. Let us also not forget how important it is to remove any sense of blame or guilt. Complications such as high blood pressure, gestational diabetes, or early delivery are not failings on the part of the mother. They are often unpredictable, biologically driven events that can happen to anyone. The real power lies not in assigning blame, but in acknowledging the risk and acting on it. Through adjustments in diet, medication, monitoring, and lifestyle, mothers can outsmart what once was seen as an inevitably grim forecast. Picture the many ways people could use these insights creatively. A community-based exercise class specifically dedicated to mothers who have experienced preeclampsia could offer a safe and supportive environment to maintain heart health. Local obstetric clinics could partner with stroke prevention charities to sponsor screening events. Cardiologists might collaborate with mental health counselors to cover the full spectrum of postpartum challenges. All of these steps would be energized by the recognition that pregnancy is not just an isolated event, but a window into long-term health patterns. And that brings us to the finale of our journey through these revelations. The big takeaway is that problems like preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, preterm birth, and small for age births are not random occurrences you endure for 9 months and then forget. They may be your body's way of saying, "I am struggling, do not ignore me." When that message is heeded, there is enormous potential to catch early warning signs of a severe disorder like stroke. When it is not, the sooner or later cost can be heartbreakingly high. We have explored how these dangers can manifest long after newborn cries have turned into teenage laughter. We have discussed how stressful pregnancies might disrupt cardiovascular health, even as families move on to new chapters in their lives. We have also dived into the hopeful side, usage of advanced screenings, lifestyle modifications, and emotional support can protect women from a crisis that seems to appear suddenly, but is often brewing under the surface for years. Thank you for staying with us through this extensive look at one of modern medicine's most urgent and illuminating topics. If you found these revelations helpful or thought-provoking, you can always share them with the women and families in your life who might likewise benefit from considering their own pregnancy histories as part of their health outlook. Remember that with knowledge comes empowerment, and collectively, we can foster a culture of prevention and vigilance for the sake of all mothers. Stay curious, stay proactive, and let us work together to write a different chapter for the health of women everywhere.